Ziv, okay. You mean it wasn't in progress? Ziv Stahl is the executive director of Yesh Din, There Is Law, an Israeli human rights organization. She is one of the lead organizers of a recent report, The State of the Occupation, which is a product of the combined efforts of 21 Israeli rights organizations and reviews the legal and human rights conditions of Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Israel, and of which she'll be speaking about today. In addition, we wish to point out that on October 7th of last year, Ziv was visiting kibbutz Kfar Azza, where she had grown up, when it was subjected to a violent attack in which the kibbutz was destroyed and dozens were murdered, including immediate family members. Ziv has been deeply affected by the traumatic events Israelis have suffered this past year. Now I will ask her her first question. Ziv, we wish to start by asking you to talk about yourself and your work with Yesh Din.
Thank you, Ruben. Thanks everyone for joining in. So as Ruben said, I grew up in kibbutz Kfar Azza. Most of my family was still living there until October. I am living in Tel Aviv. I moved to Tel Aviv in my early 20s to go to the university. I have a master's degree in political science. And I've been with Yesh Din since 2010, so that's a long time. Actually, exactly, I joined in early October, so that's kind of an anniversary soon. I've been the executive director since April 2020, but first I was a researcher in the research department, and a few years later I became the director of the research department. I wrote a lot of Yesh Din's reports and data sheets. And been the executive director ever since. Challenging job. Maybe just to say a few things about Yesh Din. So Yesh Din is an Israeli human rights organization. We have a mixed team of Israelis and Palestinians, but the organization itself is Israeli. It's listed in Israel. It was founded in 2005 by a group of mostly women, might I say even elderly women, who were members of Qassam Watch, which is another Israeli group, which used to or still is monitoring checkpoints throughout the West Bank. And they felt like they encountered a lot of Palestinians who told them about many settler violence, but sometimes also encounters with the military, and that they had no answers to give them. They couldn't help them in that aspect, and they kind of initiated the foundation of a legal organization, or an organization that is focused and has legal tools to apply, to go to the police, to apply to the Israeli authorities, and try, naively, I think they thought, try to make the police investigate settler violence and other types of crimes committed to Palestinians. So these women grew up to be a group of almost 40 volunteers that we have on Yesh Din. And basically today what we do is focusing both on the individual level. So we provide legal aid to individual Palestinians who are suffering from violence, from other violations of their rights. And a more systematic level, which is analyzing all the cases we deal with individually, accumulates all the data that we have in order to say something about the system and how it works and where are we going. So we have, as I said before, a research department that also provides that. We have three main projects. So one is settler violence. We call it law enforcement on Israeli civilians who harm Palestinians. We have kind of a similar project in regards to law enforcement on security forces in Israel and the lack of accountability for them. And the last main project we have is a legal project that deals with access to land. So we have a lot of individual cases some of them are very known, like Amona and Chomesh, that we take to court and try to win there. And it also has a larger effect on the policies on the ground. So I think that's us.
So Yesh Din got together with other human rights organizations and formed a consortium that you called the Platform. And how did that come about?
So I'll take you a little bit behind the scenes. Most of the directors of Israeli NGOs who deals in some way or another with the occupation come together and meet every now and then. And we discuss shared problems, shared challenges. We give advice to one another. Sometimes we have a lecture and so on. And it was very clear at some point that we want to, first of all, maybe kind of pool our resources together in order to have a bigger impact. And second of all, that we have joint needs in a way. And I think the thought was how to kind of influence mainly, I think the first thought was Israeli public, to get a bigger picture or more wide picture of everything that is going on in the West Bank. We all specializes in different kind of aspects or different areas, or we are professionals, so we have a very, I would say, small area where everyone has their specialties, but it's very hard to create a wholesome picture. So that was the first thought. And then we came up with this idea that we can kind of mention the yearly anniversary of the occupation, that means the month of June, by providing a state of the occupation report, which means that we try to look at trends and events of the past year and analyze it and provide information and data. Of course, the occupation is sometimes very complex or very not straightforward. So you need a little bit of background or a little bit of explanations before you talk about data and just numbers and phenomena. So we try in the report to kind of present a bigger picture, taking information from all the organizations to show it in one place that people can get full picture. I hope we succeeded in that. This year was the second year of presenting such a report. But the platform itself, it's not an organization. As you said, it's more of a consortium, or maybe similar to its name, it's a platform. So it's kind of a hybrid thing. We also have different kind of groups of organizations that are joined together in other endeavors, such as we have a representative that does lobby for us in the EU, in Brussels. That's a group of 12 organizations who support that. We have another group of organizations who has a lobbyist in the Israeli Knesset, in the Israeli parliament, that also promotes and advocates for our interests and our agendas. So we try to go as the need arises, and then whoever wants to join in a certain initiative. And I think it's really useful and nice that we have such collaboration and partnership.
Does it have a large impact within Israel?
The report itself, no. It was also very hard to get the media interest. I must admit, at least the mainstream media, because there has been some more media coverage by not mainstream venues. But I think it has a slow kind of an effect, because when someone wants to find information, they can find it, they can Google it and then find it. And I think it will grow. We are getting better. So the first year we had no attention whatsoever, because we didn't organize the media part so well. This year we got it better. It's been a very challenging year. So as you can imagine, that wasn't so easy, and it's not easy to get a headline in the news in Israel this year. Every day we have 5, I think, very, big headlines on other things. So it's also always a matter of timing.
Yeah, it's been a very eventful year, especially in the territories. Like it's nearly unprecedented. So much activity, so much violence, and you have a fellow like Smotrich as the in charge of the territories, in charge of financing for them. Could you tell us a little bit about him and how that affects the territories today?
Yeah, so I'm sure you all know that Smotrich has a background in Regavim, which is a right-wing movement. He is also a lawyer, by the way. I've seen him in court presenting for Regavim before he became a Knesset member. He got a lot of political power. I think from the situation that also, I'm sure you're all aware of, the situation where Netanyahu really needed a government in order not to be, or he thinks it will rescue him from being prosecuted. Excuse me, just a sec. So I think it's more of his powers are more than his actual political power, in the sense of not that many people voted for him, but enough people voted for him, unfortunately, and for Ben-Gvir. And basically what they both did is demand a lot of very radical demands within the coalition agreements. So even before the government was actually sworn, you could have seen the roadmap for this government and where it's going to lead us. And that was alarming as is. I think in a different manner than past governments in Israel, they are actually implementing what they agreed on in the coalition agreements and the outlines of the government. So we actually had a kind of a policy paper analyzing the coalition agreements and the outlines of the new government. And we are very much alarmed to see that almost everything is being implemented very fast. So it's not only that it's been a very eventful year, but it's also happening so fast. We say that almost everything that has been done was done before, but now it's on steroids. It's a lot in the same time, and it's very hard to follow. So as you said, Smotrich got in the coalition agreements 2 jobs, which gives him almost unlimited powers in regards to what's going on in the territories, in the West Bank especially. And that is, first of all, the Minister of Treasury, where he sits on the top of the money and he can transfer whatever budgets he wants to the West Bank. And we've seen a lot of money going to the West Bank, not only in the main, budget, the law of the budget, but also in other ways that are more under the table and more hidden. So it's hard to keep track on. So this is on the one hand. And the other hand is that Smotrich got a new job made especially for him on his demand, which is another minister within the Ministry of Defense. And in the agreement, there is also an annex dividing the authorities between him and Gallant, the actual Minister of Defense, basically creating another office within the Ministry of Defense that allows Smotrich to control almost any aspect of the West Bank. And when I say almost any aspect, it's all civilian matters of West Bank, leaving Gallant in charge only on the aspects that are that has to do with operational or security, pure security issues. All the rest, both in regards to Palestinians and to settlers, are now at the hand of Smotrich. And in the office, he also created new bodies and new jobs that allows him to operate as a different office within the Ministry of Defense. So we have this new body under him that is called the Settlement Administration, which of course he appointed to the head someone close to him. And then we have a civilian deputy to the head of the civil administration. The civil administration is a military body. Now we have a civilian who is actually the governor in practice of the West Bank, emptying all of the authorities from the hand of the head of the civil administration and putting it into the hands of a civilian. And we have a lot of those, steps that are kind of maybe bureaucratic, maybe boring to explain when you need to explain it to someone. Sounds very technical and structural, but actually this is a revolution in the West Bank, transforming the way Israel controls the West Bank into annexation. And I think what's important to understand is this is where Smotrich wants us to be. He wants to dismantle the way Israel is controlling the West Bank and basically kind of blocking any future possibility for a Palestinian state or any kind of political solution in the future, taking us to full annexation and maybe an apartheid state, because he doesn't want to force the Palestinians, but they are there, and he definitely wants the land. So the way we see it's going, this is where it's going.
Well, I think you have written about how the assaults on by the settlers on Palestinians and the cooperation of the military is being whitewashed, and I think is it much greater now than before?
Yeah. So first of all, I think there's few phenomena that is important to mention in what's going on in the West Bank. So I was talking a little bit about the structural changes, and I can elaborate maybe later a little bit more about that. But on the ground, we've seen the West Bank changing completely, and the army acts as a complicit in many aspects to the settlers and to the settlement movement and to Smotrich. First of all, because Smotrich does control, as I said, Kogat and the civil administration, which is in charge of a lot of aspects, such as planning and construction, such as evacuations, and some of the legal aspects of law enforcement on illegal constructions.
One sec. Could you explain what Kogat is? I don't think it's.
Sorry. Kogat is the coordinator of the government to the West Bank.
The military government.
Yeah, so it's kind of the body who is in charge of the civil administration within the government, within the Ministry of Defense.
And now,
so I think what we've seen is a record year in many aspects of what's going on in the West Bank. So we've seen a rapid spike in settler violence, and this was even before the war, and also got a push once the war started. We've seen a record number, and I don't need to tell you that because Peace Now is the body who is monitoring mainly the construction of the illegal outposts in the West Bank. There has been more than 40 new outposts that was built in the recent month. We've seen an intention and already a plan, implemented plan to retroactively authorize 70 illegal outposts that are already existing in the West Bank, turning them into new settlements. We've seen declarations on state land, which allows Israel to take over more and more land. We've seen some developments in the aspects of archaeology, which is also a method to take over Palestinian land. And as I said, we've seen a lot of budgets and infrastructure and building of roads, and that goes. This is one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is what's going on with the Palestinians. So there is a lot of law enforcement towards the Palestinian in regards to construction, a lot of demolitions, a lot of movement restrictions. So Palestinians can hardly move now in the West Bank. There's a lot of checkpoints. There's a lot of just blockades that are being placed in the agricultural lands, in the ways to the agricultural lands, in the main roads leading to main routes of movement in the West Bank. And the basic, I think, or what is important to keep in mind when talking about what's going on in the West Bank is two declared kind of statement or missions by the government. So one is doubling the population of the settlers in the West Bank, with the aim of reaching 1 million settlers within 5 years. And this is doubling the amount of settlers now. And for that purpose, they're working a lot on improving the quality of life in West Bank. So many of the investments in the infrastructure, even in cellular reception, is meant in order to attract Israelis to come and settle in the West Bank. And another purpose is what Smotrich was quoted saying, that they want to change the DNA of the way Israel controls the West Bank. And by changing the DNA, he means these are permanent changes. He doesn't want to change that is achieved now, but can be changed with another government. He wants to create a situation where it's irreversible, when even if the coalition will at some point will be replaced, the changes are here to stay. They cannot be, reversed. And maybe just a word about settler violence, because Yesh Din deals a lot with settler violence. So, as I said, we've seen a record year in settler violence, and I think the main thing that we've seen is a growth not only in the number of incidents that we document, because that grew a lot also, but also in the number of participants in those kind of incidents. And we've seen few big pogroms with hundreds of participants in them. The severity of the incidents is also on the rise. And we've seen much more casualties and even death incidents of Palestinians in incidents that started with settler violence, sometimes with the participation of the army. And we have seen a worrying phenomena that we've seen before, but this, I think, in recent years, it's become more and more common to see, is the participation, the active participation of the military. So it can be in a passive way, where they just safeguard the violent settlers, but it can also be a really active participation of that you have sometimes on camera, soldiers in uniform attacking Palestinians with the settlers. And then the other side is the lack of enforcement on both soldiers and settlers who harm Palestinians. I'm sure you all know Ben Gvir is the minister who is in charge of the police. So, and there's a lot of information about his giving a directive and leading a direct policy of lack of enforcement on settler violence. Both him and Smotrich denies the phenomena of settler violence. They say it's a campaign. They call it the campaign of settler violence. They talk about it as if it's a smearing campaign, not as if it existed in real life. And they refuse to address it. And the way they do address it is more of like giving back wind to the attackers. So we had Smotrich even before the war, after the big pogrom in Hawara, calling to wipe out Hawara. And, we have a lot of those kind of like quotes. I think that the one maybe good thing for us in this government is that we don't have to kind of try to expose the real meaning or the real policies. They are very outspoken about it. They put it on the table. They are proud of what they're doing. So it's very easy to identify and then explain to others what's happening.
Despite the fact that there's Ben Gvir in charge of the police, can you go to the police and say, look, these Palestinians have been attacked. Can you do something about it? Will there be any will there be any action against them, legal action?
So this is what you described is every day in Yesh Din. In that project specifically, we actually document specific incidents of settler violence. We've done that for almost 20 years. And then we help them to file a complaint with the police. And since we are also representing them as their lawyers, we monitor the investigation. And then if there's, I'll give you the spoiler that 92% of all investigation files are closed without any proceedings, so legal proceedings. So we get also the investigative materials, and then sometimes we appeal the decision, but the ultimate result is almost full impunity to settlers who attack Palestinians or harm their properties. So yes, we keep doing that, but the answers are getting much more hard even to get an answer. Not only that the investigations are not leading to indictments, but actually it's very hard for us now to communicate with the police. There is a whole, the commander spirit is very strong. And we actually have some information now, solid information, that it's not only a feeling or, a sentiment that we sense from the police. These are actually the directions of Ben Gvir to the police. We also have a new person who is going to be appointed to be the commander of the Judea and Samaria police. which is, he used to be the military secretary for Ben Gvir until now. So someone very close to Ben Gvir is going to be now in charge of those investigations. We have also the retired commander to the West Bank, the central commander, saying after he retired that there is a problem with the way the police is disregarding settler violence and does not enforce the law, and he uses examples. So I think it's not only, we feel like everyone is kind of, telling our story. We've been saying that for a long time, and now actually people are speaking out and talking about it more openly. So even with going to the police, the feeling is that it's kind of getting, kind of pointless in a way. And a lot of Palestinians are despaired, and they do not want to file complaints anymore because they say it's a waste of my time. It's put me in kind of a danger, and for no reason, because nothing will happen with the complaint.
The I think last week or 2 weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago, the head of the Shin Bet said that the settler violence is an existential threat to Israel.
Exactly.
Does he act as an ally ever to Yesh Din?
No, it's not openly. I don't know if they use our information or not. Not openly. They never address us. Look, both the military and the police used to be much more in touch with us, to the point where we even sometimes gave lectures to the training of new investigators of the army. This is not happening anymore. We are not meeting with them anymore. I think they're banned of meeting us. They will never come to a conference anymore by Ashdin. They will never have a work meeting with us. So the relationship with both of these bodies changed. With the Shin Bet, we never had like a direct relationship, other than one time on one incident, which I'm sure you all heard of, after the Duma case 2 years back, where a whole family, the Dawabsha family, was murdered by a settler, burnt to death in their home. Then, because we had a kind of a shred of evidence, the Shin Bet met us and kind of asked us for the information we had. But as far as I can remember, that was all the engagement we ever had directly with the Shin Bet. Although many of our cases are investigated by the Shin Bet, but we engage with the police directly, and it's not a direct relationship.
But in the recent demonstrations, like the police have been hitting Israelis hard, and Yesh Din was saying for many years that there's impunity for attacks on Palestinians. Has that created more sensitivity to what the police can do and what the lawlessness among them?
I think it's a very good question. So yes, there is a lot of police brutality. It's not as close to what's happening in the West Bank, of course. And in the West Bank, the main problem with the police is lack of investigations or lack of law enforcement in that sense. And more of the violence in the West Bank is military one. But I think the question is good because I know for a fact, and that even before the demonstrations that we see now, that people who suffers some kind of, police brutality and find themselves kind of on the opposite side from the law enforcement agencies in that sense. I'm not talking about being a criminal, of course. Kind of, I think it's an eye-opening moment for them. And then they believe other stories more. So now when a Palestinian said, a soldier attacked me for no reason at all, they see it differently. So yes, I think there is a lot of change on that, and also kind of the Israeli public learns to doubt what the authorities are telling them in many aspects, and that started with the formation of this government and the promotion of the judicial overall. People went to the demonstrations and they kind of lost confidence in this government. And then when you change your perspective, you start to see a bigger picture. And I think for many years, the Israeli public refused to take any interest in what's going on in the West Bank. and what Israel is doing in its occupation. It was kind of a forgotten backyard for many years. And I think both the judicial overall, but then came October 7, and also kind of forced Israelis to address this issue, to think about what will be the resolution, what will help us to move ahead or forward, what will secure Israeli future. And I think that goes for our benefit. And then the police brutality and the police, the way they treat protesters is really affecting the way people are now viewing this government. They are talking about openly and now about this is a Ben Gvir militia. He appoints the people, he tells them what to do. They are all about pleasing him. And this is really felt in Tel Aviv. So imagine what it's like in the territories.
Yeah. When you were introduced and mentioned you were at the Kfar Azza when it was attacked, would you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, a little bit. So as I said before, I grew up there. It's my second home. I've been in Tel Aviv for 20 years almost, but I go to visit my family and friends quite often. I was actually going there because of the holiday. And I came for the whole weekend. I was sleeping at my sister's house in the kibbutz. And like everyone else in Israel, we woke up in around 6:30 to the sounds of sirens, but also to the sound of explosions all over. And it was very intense. It was clear right from the beginning. It sounded like a war has broken. Everyone who's been in Kfar Azza or lived in Kfar Azza is kind of used to there being some attacks sometimes, but usually, you have one siren and one explosion or maybe few, but that's it. Once it is so intense, it's clear something else is about to happen. We of course ran to the safe room. At the first few hours we were there. My sister, her husband, and one of the girls, which is 17, and the dog. And we were in the closed room for a while. And we kind of knew, we saw there was a break in the silence and the bombing for, I think, after half an hour or so. And we left the safe room for a minute. We thought about maybe getting a coffee. It was morning, very early in Saturday morning. We used to sleep late in Saturdays. So we kind of, okay, let's start the day maybe and see how it goes. And then it didn't last long. We didn't even manage to finish making the coffee. There was another siren, but we already saw on the pavement in the kibbutz a group of terrorists running. So we knew there was some kind of like terrorists inside the kibbutz. We thought this is it. It was like 6 or 7 people, and I thought that's the incident. So we tried to call the security guard in the kibbutz, telling him like where they went. He already didn't answer, and now we know he was already dead at that time. But basically, we locked ourselves again in the safe room. When I say locked ourselves, it's metaphorically speaking, because there is no possibility, as we all learned, to lock the safe room. But as soon as we saw this group, my brother-in-law went and grabbed his gun and was lying outside the safe room with the gun drawn and pointed to the entrance of the house. And we stayed like that for a few hours, not understanding what's happening. Basically, we heard a lot of shootings, like light weapons shooting around us. And we saw some of the messages that went in the WhatsApp groups of the kibbutz. So we knew there was some terrorists, but we in no stage understood what's going on. For sure, we didn't know it was happening also in other places, and the magnitude of the situation didn't even occur to us, I have to say. At some point around noon, another niece of mine who was living and was sleeping with her boyfriend from another kibbutz in the neighborhood of the young generation in Kfar Azza. they arrived into to their parents' house, her parents' house, which is my sister's house. And then we realized that there is, kind of a bigger scale event going on. They came to the house with him wounded, severely wounded in both of his arms from gunshots. He was actually trying to hold the safe room door and shot through the door. And then they fled out of the room, out of the window, and crossed under fire the entire kibbutz, kind of collapsing on the doorstep of my sister's house. And then we had to take care of him. He was severely wounded. It took a long time before we got rescued. We left the safe room after 14 hours altogether. And we were one of the first ones because we had a person who was severely injured. We spent all of that time trying to take care of him, but also trying to get him to be evacuated to a hospital and maintaining him in a, alive, basically, trying to stop the bleeding and to have him conscious. And also on that time, we tried to see like who's okay. So we knew my dad is okay because he wrote every now and then that he's fine and he's locked in his safe room. His house is very close to my sister. My brother was actually camping outside of the kibbutz in a forest, very close to the kibbutz. And at first we were really worried about him because he was in an open area. He didn't have a safe room. So we thought about him, but he responded very quickly that he's okay as well. And we hoped he's like fine. And he went to some military bunker in the area and hid there once he knew there was terrorists around. And was rescued also by the army late at night. But my sister-in-law didn't respond since early in the morning. And at first we thought she was a therapist, and it was actually in those kind of events, went to volunteer a lot of times and help people, mainly kids who were experiencing panic attacks or anxiety. So we assumed she went somewhere to help and forgot her phone. But as the hours went by and we realized that something severe is going on, we were really worried. And it took 2 more days for us to hear from her neighbors when they were rescued from Kfar Azza, that they actually went to see how she was, because we asked them to many times, and that they saw very early in the morning that she was shot to death in her safe room with the 2 dogs. There was a grenade exploding there and shooting signs and evidence of what happened. So we don't know exactly, but we can kind of assume.
What was the
Kfar Azza lost 63 of her members on that day, and 19 hostages. Some of them were already released. One of them, 2 of them, was actually killed while trying to flee to escape their captivity in Gaza, and was shot by mistake by the Israeli military. And 5 are still there in Gaza, which is almost a year. That's a very long time. So we are all very, very worried. And the kibbutz has not returned yet. So the community is kind of scattered. There are some who are in Shfaim, which is another kibbutz. In the hotel there is a tourist site, like hotel, and that the main part of the population is there. Some are in hotels in Tel Aviv and Herzliya, and they're expected to move to another kibbutz, kind of in the area of Kfar Azza, but further from the Gaza Strip. I hope in the coming month, like they're still under construction, but maybe during October or November.
After this happened, you wrote an article in Haaretz. I don't know if you have it with you, but you don't have it. So we'll send it out.
Yeah. I have the quote you.
Oh yeah. Okay.
You're talking about. Yeah.
Would you quote it? Because I think it's important.
Yeah. Let me just open it in a convenient way so I can actually read it. Maybe I'll just say I woke up on a Saturday after a week after the attack, and I wrote to myself basically. I didn't mean to write an article. I wrote something on my phone. It was very early in the morning, and I just wrote kind of my thoughts. I was gathering my thoughts. And then I showed a friend of mine and I said, like, look, I wrote something. And she said, you have to send it to Haaretz. It was, of course, in Hebrew. The other thing is a translation, which I'm trying to open while I speak. So it wasn't an intentional article. And I didn't expect, I think, the reactions on what I wrote. So I can't really open it, but I can say, like,
say what you said.
Atmosphere of it. Basically, I was trying to say that I don't want any revenge, and that I think Israel is investing all its creativity in developing more weapons and more defensive and offensive tools, trying to come up with an answer to what's going on in the territories, both Gaza and the West Bank. But basically, we are investing our creativity, in my opinion, in the wrong way, because this creativity and all the energies and the money and that investment in the large meaning of the word investment or energy should be aimed towards a solution, and the solution can only be a political solution. And that I really hope that the vicious cycle of death and sorrow will be ending for both the population or everyone who lives in this area between the river and the sea, which became after that an explosive phrase. But for us in Israel, it's just a term to talk about the area between the Jordan River and the sea. So I didn't mean for that to make such a, I think it made a lot of echo that I didn't realize at the time. It was a week after. We haven't even buried our loved ones. The funerals were 2 weeks after, in most cases, because it took a long time to identify everyone. And I wrote it kind of in a bubble, in a way. But I think it's good because it was very much like from, without the effect of what others think of what happened. It was only of like my own feelings and thoughts about what happened to me and to my family and to my community. And being a political person, it came out also politically. I got a lot of responses after that. That was very courageous, and I didn't realize that at the time when I sent the article.
I want to thank you. I think I should open up for questions. Izzy might have some questions for you, but thank you very much. And I think that it was a courageous article, and I think the report is very courageous too. It's a very powerful report. I hope everyone who is watching this reads it and shares it. It's really important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Izzy?
Yeah, we've got a number of questions. One of them is, what does the average Israeli think of the government's actions and inactions in the West Bank? Are they supportive or are they concerned?
Do you want me to go one by one or collect some questions and then answer?
Let's do one by one.
Okay. So I don't really know. I think many Israelis, like the Americans, I guess, and the Canadians and everyone else, is kind of living, especially nowadays with social media, in their own echo chamber. So my echo chamber naturally thinks and very critical regarding the Israeli policies in the West Bank. But I don't think that reflects on the Israeli public at large. I think there is almost a division, half and half in Israeli society for many years now, in regards to policies in the West Bank and the future of the West Bank. That being said, I can be a bit more optimistic on, there is a group called the Accord Institute, and they do a lot of polling in the Israeli societies, trying to ask clever questions. So it's not a direct question, do you support Likud or other party, or what do you think about a specific political thing, but more of a in-depth opinions and trends. And they find that most Israelis do think that there is a need for a political solution and some willingness to actually make concessions and evacuate some of the territories for peaceful political solution, one or another. So it's not necessarily two-state solution. It can be 3 states or republic, like some of the thoughts that are now, I think, being advocated. So there are many thoughts about what the solution will look like. But I think at the end of the day, the majority of Israelis, they don't care so much about the West Bank. So you have the extremists and the settlers who look at it in a more religious or more biblical way, or of this is our land, this is the holy land of Israel. We cannot give up any part of it because of the biblical meaning of it and history and heritage. But I think most Israelis do not care so much about the West Bank. Most of them haven't been to the West Bank ever or for years now. They don't go to take trips there. They don't go visit. Unlike Israelis, they do take hikes and go travel to the south and to the north, but not so much to the West Bank, even though there are huge tourism enterprises developed in the West Bank and being advertised by the Israeli government, and still you don't see a lot of Israelis go there. Most of them has been in the West Bank in their military service, actually. And this is the only experience where they encounter Palestinians in these days, because Palestinians do not enter Israel as they used to. So generations under my generation hardly knows Palestinians in other contexts than the military. But I think most of them, because they don't go there, they don't care so much. So they're not willing to sacrifice their lives, their loved ones' life, for the sake of holding on to the West Bank. That being said, I think politically Israel is divided.
Another question asked was involved with the military involvement in settler violence. Is it done on an individual basis by individual soldiers, or are they following orders from their commanders?
This is an excellent question. I will need a little bit time to say something about it. So there is the individual cases, of course, and maybe to say that the fact or the reason why we saw a deterioration on that sense since the beginning of the war is because the military enlisted a lot of settlers to reserve military service during the war, and they are now in charge of the areas next to the outposts and settlements, and that allows them to act both as soldiers but also as settlers that attack Palestinians. And in many of the cases, these people are the same people who are involved in settler violence. And we have this new phenomena, we call it now settlers in uniform, sometimes semi-uniform, not even full uniform. And it's very hard to differentiate between settler forces and military forces now. So this is one aspect. The other aspect is the fact that the military, and this has been going on for years, the military also has like a spirit of the commander. And the spirit is that I think reflects a misunderstanding and a education of the soldiers. What is the role of the military in the occupied territories? So according to both Israeli law and the international law, the soldiers on the ground are supposed to also protect Palestinians and to serve as a law enforcement body in an area where there is a civilian population. But what they perceive as their jobs is, first of all, to protect the settlers, no matter what they do, no matter who is attacking whom, and to kind of look at the Palestinians as the enemy or as potential terrorists. And this is the way they treat them in any situation. So we've seen, and we have talked about it with the military in many occasions. We have reports about that. We even have videos about that, trying to tell the army, you need to better educate the soldier on the ground, because when you talk to a high rank officer, he will know that this is the role of the military, and they will say even that we have a quote by the chief of the military. I forgot the name. The higher commander of the military in Israel. After one of the pogroms, he said that any soldier or officer that is not stopping settler violence has no place in the army. But he says that. But on the ground, what we see is soldiers and commanders on the ground that are not aware of that directive and are not following orders, because there are no, explicit orders telling them what to do, and there are no orders that tells them how to use force in a situation like that. And it's important to also know that they do have authorities, and they can detain settlers, and they can use some kind of force, limited force, with considerations, of course, to stop settler violence and to detain violent settlers, which they don't. They never ever detain violent settlers. So I think this is a kind of a complex answer, but that's the reality. So it's kind of both.
Yeah, along the same line, someone asked if there's examples of soldiers refusing to follow orders that they think are illegal.
I'm sure there are, but not known. Again, the orders are very vague in that aspect. So they don't have to disobey an order or refuse to disobey an order in that sense, because there is no order that is direct and explicit, such as, look, Israeli army has like the general orders, and then when you go to specific mission, you get more specific regulations and orders. So in that sense, they don't have these orders, the immediate ones that they need. And if you look at what they are being told every time they go to a mission in the territories in regards to the Palestinians, they do know what to do, and they do know how to exercise their power, and even more, they exercise their power sometimes without authority and without justification. And for that, they're also not being held accountable. And for sure, they are not being held accountable for standing idly by, we call it, the phenomena of soldiers not intervening in incidents of sexual violence.
We have a very specific question. Is the civil administration against the Oslo Accord?
So the civil administration as a body, no, it's not against the Oslo Accord. It was actually kind of created to implement the Oslo Accord. I think these days when it transitions and basically it becomes less of an important body in itself. Because as I said, it kind of was drained out of its authorities as a military body. And those authorities are now placed at the hand of the deputy head of the civil administration, who is a civilian. And he is subordinate to the administrative settlement body that Smotrich created in his office. So basically, now we are left with a civil administration who is more or less powerless in many of the aspects he was in charge of before, and taking kind of commands or directions from Smotrich and his gang within the Ministry of Defense. So I don't think they are against the Oslo Agreement, but Smotrich is against the Oslo Agreement for sure.
We have a political question. What's the concern about a Trump victory in the American election?
A heavy concern. Look, I was in Yesh Din when Trump was there the other time. The changes is absolutely phenomenal from when Trump is in charge and when the Democratic administration is in place. First, with taking interest of what's going on in the West Bank. During 4 years of Trump, for example, the embassy didn't come to meet us at all, didn't engage with us at all. At the times, like with Biden and also before that, when Obama was there, we had strong ties with the administration, and they take interest on monitoring illegal construction, settler violence, everything that is happening on the ground, to the extent they are very much in the details. They know a lot and they document a lot, and this goes to the highest ranks in the administration and in the White House, which is of course affecting the policies. I think what we've seen now with the sanctions is a huge help for us in trying to deal with settler violence and the settlement enterprise at large, and is a huge message to Israel and to the Israeli public, not only to the government, that this is unacceptable and Israel cannot continue going that way without any ramifications, without any accountability for these policies, and this is extremely important. So we are really worried that this will, of course, will all be taken away if, and I hope we won't get there, if Trump is elected. And on the other side, Trump was promoting if you can recall from, that seems like a very long time ago, but it's not that long ago. He called it the deal of the century. He was promoting some kind of what he called an agreement between Israelis and Palestinians. That was very one-sided agreement, not acceptable by Palestinians. It was not created with the participation of Palestinians. Basically, it was an annexation plan for the West Bank to Israel, one-sided. It had huge ramifications on human rights of Palestinians in the West Bank, and the prospects of, he thought he's creating also a Palestinian state, but that was not a Palestinian state. So we don't know what he plans now, and as I don't have to tell you, he's a wild card. So it's very hard to predict what he will do, and I think it can go both ways. He can also come to Israel and say, I don't need this war, and the war, and this headache, and be done with that. We are not supporting you anymore. So it's very hard to predict, but I think he's very much influenced by powers, evangelistic powers and others that are influencing him to bad directions in regard to human rights.
Yeah, have you been able to present your report to the U.S. ambassador or to the EU representatives?
Yes, we have, not directly to the U.S. ambassador, but to the embassy and consulate and some others in the American administration as well. But also, yes, we've done several visits. So I've been to Berlin with some of that report and basically focusing on annexation. But we also did briefings to the EU representatives here and in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem. And basically, we enjoy talking about it with whoever we think is can be, influential and is interested. So yeah, we try to spread it around as much as we can. And as I said, we have a representative within the EU Parliament lobbying for us. So she also held a lot of meetings and briefings on the report as well.
So is the plan to update the report every year, or?
Yes, I'm smiling because I think the committee that did it so far, which was myself and two other executive directors of Physicians for Human Rights and Emek Shaveh, we did it for 2 years. It's a lot of burden for an executive director of an organization also to take that mission on. So I don't think we will continue, but I hope some others will take their turn in fulfilling that mission. I think it's a very good tradition for us, and I think it will, have, once it's constant, there will be an effect of like anticipated report and a joint, place where you can find all the information we need. We didn't talk so much about the report, but a main part of the report was naturally invested or directed to what's going on in Gaza this year. So last year it was, I think, the more slim part of the report, and this year it got the first part or the first chapters of the report, and a lot of the report was dealing with what was going on there. Remember that it was published in June, so we were talking about the starvation policy, the number of casualties, the Sde Teiman military camp, detention military camp, and the torture, and what was going on in the hospital in Sde Teiman. So something has changed since we published the report, but yeah, I hope it will become a tradition and focusing on the burning issues at the moment.
Yeah. In terms of publicizing the information, have you had much reaction from the New York Times, the Guardian, Le Monde, the major international papers, CNN, those kind of outlets?
Not on the report itself, but on the issue for sure. Yeah, we had a lot of coverage and still have a lot of coverage. Just on the top of my head, so the New York Times had a huge article in regards to the settlement movement at large and how it became so dominant in Israeli public sphere. Basing many of the data, we've been working with them on that report for years, I think, giving them a lot of documentation and data, and some of the data is based on Yesh Din's work, but other organizations such as Peace Now and B'Tselem and others as well. There has been a lot, actually there was a podcast on that with Ronen Bergman, who is the Israeli reporter working for the New York Times on that story. So there is a podcast in the Daily and that you are most welcome to listen to. I think it gives a good overall look on how the settlement movement became what it is today in Israeli public. It's fascinating. But there has been a lot of coverage, yes, in The Guardian and many others, BBC, CNN, I think they are all really looking into what's going on both in the West Bank and Gaza at the moment. So it's easier to, to keep them interested. And they approach us a lot. I talk to foreign press on a daily basis. Even Japan and other places that you wouldn't even think care about what's going on in Israel.
Reuven, I think we're past 12 o'clock. Should we wrap up? Let Ziv make a final, hopefully optimistic statement.
I see Reuven is not answering, so I'll take it as a yes.
Yeah, sure.
So maybe just to thank you all for listening and coming and taking interest, which is really important for us. And I think this is also an optimistic thing, to have friends and supporters that kind of like give us a backwind to keep on doing what we do. It's not getting any easier inside the Israeli atmosphere. And it's very hard to be optimistic when I'm sure you are all keeping track So what's going on both in Gaza and the north is really scary and not looking very good at the moment. I was asked the same, I think today, early in the morning, I had another meeting and someone asked me, how do you keep doing what you do? So I tried to say that I think maybe it's in our DNA. Human rights people have in their DNA to keep some kind of hope nuclear within them. Otherwise, you cannot get out of bed in the morning and do what you do. So I think for us, it's just keeping in the back of our heads the history of a lot of conflicts that was resolved at the end, sometimes without anyone anticipating that in advance. So the Berlin Wall and the apartheid regime in South Africa and many other bad regimes, suddenly or one day they were over. And looking back, maybe someone can analyze and say what led to that or what was the process that led to that, but no one anticipated that on a real time. So I'm trying to wake up, not every morning, but sometimes in the morning, thinking there will come a day where this is all over and we have an important role in making sure that will happen. And in the meantime, trying to preserve human rights and human dignity, both the Palestinians, but also for us as an Israeli. I think it's really important for me as an Israeli not to become similar to our enemies, not to become similar to Hamas, and to remain humane in all of that, not hateful. So maybe that's my optimistic note. The best I can provide.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sure the participants in this webinar really appreciate the information and your passion and dedication to this important cause.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
For having me, Reuven.
Thank you, Ziv.
Okay. Shana Tova to everybody.
Shana Tova.